So picture this. An unexpected crisis hits you right in the face.
Oh, we all know that feeling.
Right. Your heart rate just violently spikes. Your vision, like, physically narrows until you can only see the problem.
Yeah, tunnel vision.
Exactly. Logic completely leaves the building, and pure, unfiltered panic just takes over the steering wheel. We have all been there.
Absolutely.
In that exact second, your brain is basically acting like a deer in the wild. When that deer senses a sudden threat, its biology instinctually screams at it to run from danger immediately.
It doesn't think, it just reacts.
Right. It doesn't pause to evaluate the threat level. It doesn't, calculate variables or look for an optimal escape route. It just bolts.
Which makes sense for a deer.
Well, yeah, but the tragic irony of that biological response is that this pure, unthinking panic often makes the situation infinitely worse.
Oh, for sure.
The deer acts so erratically to escape the perceived danger that it ends up sprinting directly into traffic.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Okay, let's unpack this, because getting past that deer in headlights biology is the entire mission of today's deep dive.
And it's such an important mission.
It really is. And just to orient you, this is episode 4 in our series on the book The Obstacle is the Way, and we are targeting the exact moment an obstacle appears in your life.
You know, the deer analogy is actually a perfect illustration of what neurologists refer to as an amygdala hijack.
An amygdala hijack.
Yeah, it is a completely natural, deeply ingrained biological reaction to a perceived threat.
Even if the threat isn't, like, life or death.
Exactly. When you encounter an obstacle, your brain floods your nervous system with cortisol and adrenaline. It's preparing your body for a literal physical fight for survival, even if the quote-unquote threat is just an aggressive email from your boss.
Wow, so your body genuinely thinks it's about to be eaten.
It really does. However, here is where humans diverge from the deer. We don't have to be slaves to our immediate biology.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. We possess the unique cognitive architecture, specifically the prefrontal cortex, to actually override that panic switch.
So we can just turn it off.
Well, we have the neurological hardware to hit the brakes, yeah. We can carefully examine a threat before we act on it.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this brings us to the core transformative concept we really need to explore today, which is the active practice of objectivity.
Objectivity.
Yes. And to truly understand how to execute this biological override, we can look to the philosophy of Miyamoto Musashi, specifically his teachings from the Book of Five Rings.
Oh, Musashi. He was the legendary, undefeated master of sword combat in 17th century Japan, right?
That's the one.
A realm where a single moment of panic didn't just mean a bad day at the office. I mean, it meant immediate and certain death.
Exactly. When you're facing down a razor-sharp steel blade, objectivity is literally your only shield.
Man, that is high stakes.
It is. And Musashi identified the critical difference between what he called the perceiving eye and the observing eye.
Perceiving versus observing.
Right. So the perceiving eye is inherently weak. It's weak because it projects insurmountable obstacles onto the situation.
What do you mean by project?
Well, it brings its own baggage, you know?
Right.
Its insecurities, its past traumas, and its anxieties into the arena.
Oh, I see. It's not just seeing the sword, it's seeing everything you're afraid of.
Precisely. And from an evolutionary standpoint, the human brain actually defaults to the perceiving eye.
Really? Why is that?
Our ancient ancestors survived by assuming the rustle in the bushes was a saber-toothed tiger, not just the wind.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. The brain is hardwired to assume the absolute worst-case scenario because, historically, that assumption kept us alive.
Okay, so today, the perceiving eye sees a minor career setback and hallucinates total financial ruin.
You hit the nail on the head. If Musashi used his perceiving eye during a duel, he wouldn't just see his opponent's sword, he would vividly picture his own death, his failure, the end of his entire legacy.
And that emotional weight causes hesitation.
Yes.
And hesitation in a sword fight gets you killed.
Without a doubt.
So the observing eye is, it's the antidote to that biological hallucination.
Precisely. The observing eye is strong because it simply sees events exactly as they are, entirely clear of exaggerations, judgments, and misperceptions.
Just the facts.
Exactly. It strips away the emotional weight and leaves only the factual reality of the physical environment.
So what did Musashi see then?
Using the observing eye, Musashi saw the angle of the opponent's blade, the exact distance between their feet, and the physical footing on the ground. Nothing more.
Wow.
One eye is paralyzed by meaning, the other eye is mobilized by facts.
Okay, wait. I struggle with this, though.
How so?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Every modern self-help guru, every leadership coach, and virtually every therapist tells us that we need to dig deep to find the root cause of our problems.
Sure, that's a common message.
We are constantly conditioned to analyze the hidden meaning behind every setback or interpersonal conflict.
Yep.
Are you saying that taking things at first glance, essentially being entirely superficial, is actually the better strategy here? Because that feels deeply counterintuitive to everything we are taught about deep analysis and self-reflection.
It absolutely does feel counterintuitive, but the answer is surprisingly liberating.
Liberating.
Yes. In the immediate face of an obstacle, being superficial is the most profound approach you can possibly take. We think we're being deep and analytical, but really our perceptions are just feeding us useless, crippling data at the exact wrong moment.
Oh, because of the panic.
Right. When you are facing an immediate physical challenge, diving into a deep psychological analysis of why this is happening to you or what it means for your life's grand narrative effectively blinds you to the physical reality right in front of you.
You just freeze up.
Exactly. You enter a state of paralysis by analysis. The perceiving eye digs a massive hole of anxiety that you then have to exhaust yourself climbing out of before you can even begin to solve the actual problem.
So it is a form of deconstructionism. We're taking a terrifying, overwhelming whole and aggressively breaking it down into its mundane, manageable atomic parts.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
It is the difference between seeing a typo on slide 4 of your massive quarterly presentation as a mere pixel on a screen that needs to be deleted versus seeing that typo as a glowing neon sign screaming to your boss and your entire team that you are an incompetent fraud who doesn't deserve their job.
That is the exact mechanism. The observing eye stays completely on the surface, dealing with the pixel.
Just the pixels.
Right. If the typo is just a pixel, your body physically relaxes, you hit the backspace key, and you move on.
That bill.
But if the typo is a referendum on your worth as a human being, your amygdala fires, your hands shake, and you spiral.
That makes the distinction incredibly stark.
Yeah.
But let's move this out of the abstract and into the deeply personal reality of our daily lives.
Okay, let's do it.
How do we realistically maintain this incredibly disciplined observing eye when we're dealing with deeply intimidating people? We all have those individuals in our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Like a hyper-demanding boss, a heavily critical relative, or a highly aggressive industry competitor. When your heart starts racing just because of who walked into the conference room, how do you force yourself to stay on the surface?
Well, it's entirely normal for the nervous system to spike in those moments due to the power dynamics at play.
Sure.
However, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus offered a remarkably effective and frankly hilarious strategy for precisely this situation.
Hilarious. Okay, I'm listening.
He taught his students a specific mental trick for dealing with individuals who project towering authority and trigger our deepest insecurities.
What was the trick?
He explained that when you are dealing with someone who makes you feel deeply intimidated, you should mentally picture them in their private life.
Oh, like eating breakfast.
Well, specifically, you should picture them grunting, groaning, and being incredibly awkward while having sex.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that completely shatters the illusion of dominance.
It really does.
I mean, if you are vividly picturing them in that highly vulnerable state, your heart rate physically cannot stay elevated.
There is actual measurable neurobiology behind why that works so well.
Really. It's not just a joke.
No, humor and absurdity are incredibly powerful tools for disarming the brain's threat detection system.
Wow, that's fascinating.
When you laugh, or even just find something internally amusing, it activates the vagus nerve, which immediately signals safety to your nervous system.
So it physically calms you down.
Yes.
Oh.
By using Epictetus's visual, you reduce this person from a towering figure of authority to a bumbling, vulnerable, entirely ordinary biological organism.
Just a person.
Exactly. You remind yourself that beneath the impressive job title or the aggressive posturing, they are subject to the exact same ridiculous biological realities as the rest of us.
It aggressively strips away the grandiosity. And if we look deeper at this Stoic practice of cognitive reframing, they applied this deconstructionism to absolutely everything in their environment, not just intimidating people.
They applied it to everything, yeah.
Like, the text highlights how they trained themselves to view a highly luxurious, wildly expensive plate of roasted meat as simply the dead carcass of an animal.
Which is completely factual.
Right, and they would look at a highly sought-after, incredibly rare vintage of wine and force themselves to recognize it as nothing more than old fermented grapes.
They were actively intercepting what the Stoics called fantasia.
Fantasia, what is that?
It's the initial impressions and value judgments that society places on objects. They refuse to let society dictate their internal emotional state.
Man, it is a phenomenal tool for emotional regulation.
Yeah.
It completely stops us from being hypnotized by the perceived value or the perceived danger of the things around us.
Exactly. It breaks the spell.
We put these people and these objects in their proper mundane place by seeing things exactly as they truly are, rather than the terrifying monsters or the invaluable treasures we make them out to be in our minds.
What's fascinating here is how we transition this elegant philosophy into a tangible daily action.
Right, the application.
Because understanding this intellectually, or chuckling at the Epictetus example, is the easy part.
Yeah, doing it in the moment is a whole different story.
Applying it when the pressure is truly on, when your career or your relationship is actually on the line, is an entirely different endeavor. Objectivity takes immense strength.
It's not just a trick.
No, it's not a magical switch you just flip on when you need it. It is a mental muscle that must be actively developed through tension, through heavy lifting, and through holding the weight even when your brain is screaming at you to drop it.
Like going to the gym.
Exactly. This is exactly why martial arts, going back to Musashi, focus just as heavily on mental conditioning as they do on physical repetition.
Because you have to train for the panic?
You cannot expect to have a strong, observing eye if you never take the time to actually train it under pressure.
We would never expect to run a marathon without putting in miles on the road, so we shouldn't expect to handle a major life crisis without regularly training our minds.
Well said.
So, what is the specific workout routine for objectivity? How do you, the listener, actively train this mental muscle today?
The workout routine involves a very specific, highly practical exercise, which is pretending your current situation is simply not happening to you.
Pretending it's not happening to you.
Yes. In modern psychology, there is a well-documented concept known as Solomon's paradox.
Solomon's paradox, okay.
It describes the phenomenon where human beings are remarkably wise, incredibly objective, and highly strategic when reasoning about other people's problems.
I do that all the time.
But we are incredibly short-sighted, irrational, and emotionally driven when reasoning about our own.
Right, because with a friend's problem, the subjective emotional you is entirely removed from the equation. Distance automatically creates clarity.
Exactly. Think about what happens when a close friend comes to you with a massive, seemingly complex problem.
Yep.
Maybe they're facing a terrifying career transition or a messy breakup. To them, the world is ending.
Oh, for sure. Total catastrophe.
But to you, their issues often appear incredibly obvious. The solutions are perfectly clear, and you can instantly map out exactly what they need to do.
Like just update the resume, call this specific contact, set this specific boundary.
Exactly. We take their situation at face value with our observing eye.
We don't bring all that baggage.
But when that exact same problem happens to us, the perceiving eye takes over, the emotional baggage floods in, and we just lose our minds.
We totally do.
So the exercise is to take your current situation and pretend it is happening to a third party.
Okay, if you are listening to this right now, I want you to try doing this with me. Think of the biggest problem in your life right now.
The one that's really weighing on you.
The exact thing that kept you awake at 2 a.m. last night staring at the ceiling. I want you to actively zoom out, write the problem off calmly, greet it without a shred of emotion, and pretend your best friend just came to you with this exact scenario over coffee.
What would you tell them?
Exactly. What specific step-by-step advice do you give them? You have to forcefully give yourself clarity instead of giving yourself sympathy.
That is a crucial point. Sympathy feels good, but it doesn't solve anything.
Sympathy feels incredibly good in the short term. It validates the perceiving eye. But clarity is what actually gets you out of the mess.
Yes.
And I want to emphasize that this is a heavy mental workout, which means it takes serious repetition.
You will very likely fail the first time you try it.
Honestly, probably the first 10 times.
Yeah, the emotional pull of your own life, the gravity of your own narrative is incredibly strong.
It's hard to ignore.
But the more you deliberately practice it, the more skilled you become at generating that psychological distance on demand.
It gets easier.
The more you force the observing eye to take the lead, the more your perception begins to work for you rather than against you. It becomes a sharp tool you wield rather than a deep trap you fall into.
As we transition into the structural reality of how this changes our daily lives, we need to clearly define what we actually mean when we use the word perspective.
That's important, yeah.
Because perspective isn't just a vague attitude. It actually has two distinct, vital components that we constantly inject into a situation, often entirely without realizing it.
That is a crucial distinction. The first component of perspective is context.
Context.
So context is the map of the broader reality. It is maintaining a sense of the larger picture of the world, zooming out to remember that you are a small part of a massive ecosystem,
Right.
and you are not solely defined by the immediate crisis sitting on your desk.
Okay, so that's context. What's the second part?
The second component is framing. Framing dictates how you read that map.
How you read it.
Yes, it is the specific, individual lens through which you choose to interpret those events. Context gives you the factual lay of the land, but your framing dictates whether you view that land as an opportunity to build or a barren wasteland.
Wow, that's powerful.
Both context and framing can be actively, consciously injected to entirely alter the trajectory of a situation.
So you have complete control over it.
The difference between utilizing the right perspective and the wrong perspective is absolutely everything. It is the foundational framework for how we respond to adversity.
So what does this all mean for how we operate day to day?
It comes down to our self-talk.
Right. It fundamentally connects back to the very words we use when we speak to ourselves in our own heads. There is a massive, highly destructive danger in putting the word I in front of a problem.
Oh, completely.
Think about the massive difference between telling yourself, I am terrified of public speaking, I am a terrible presenter, my career is completely ruined,
Versus just looking at the facts.
versus viewing yourself simply in relation to the physical obstacle. The obstacle is a room full of chairs, a group of people, and a microphone.
That's all it is.
You are a person who must speak words into that microphone for exactly 10 minutes.
When you fuse your core identity with the obstacle, when you use the wrong perspective, you become entirely consumed.
You lose yourself in it.
You become overwhelmed by the emotional weight of your own framing.
We take a completely manageable task, like delivering a 10-minute project update, and through the wrong framing, we make it a referendum on our intrinsic worth as a human being.
Which is just so exhausting.
It is. The right perspective has this strange, almost magical way of cutting towering adversities right down to their factual size.
Yes, it shrinks them.
We can limit or expand our perspective at will, using selective editing to properly orient ourselves so that we are physically and mentally ready to act.
Where the head goes, the body follows.
I love that.
That is the fundamental anchoring truth underlying everything we have explored today. Perception always precedes action.
Before you do anything.
Before you move, before you speak, before you make a strategic decision in a crisis, you first perceive the environment. Therefore, the right action can only ever follow the right perspective.
It's the prerequisite.
If your perception is warped by panic, insecurity, or the hallucinations of the perceiving eye, your actions will reflect that exact chaos.
You'll sprint blindly into traffic.
Exactly. But if your head is steady, if your perspective is deeply rooted in the observing eye, your body will naturally follow with decisive, effective, and calculated action.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to remind you that these seemingly small tweaks in perspective have the phenomenal power to completely alter what once felt like entirely impossible tasks.
They really do.
We are not talking about ignoring fear. The goal here is absolutely not to pretend fear does not exist or to smother your genuine anxiety with empty, toxic positivity.
No, that never works.
The goal is to take exactly what you are terrified of, wait for that fear to physically strike you, and then systematically deconstruct it. Look at it from a completely new, mathematically objective angle.
Just the facts.
When you break it down into its atomic parts, the obstacle immediately loses its power over you. And the absolute best part of this entire process is that we actually become strong exactly where we were previously weak. We discover massive leverage we didn't even know existed.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how we live our lives, we have to acknowledge a hard, unyielding truth.
What's that?
We retain total absolute control over our perspective, but we absolutely cannot change the obstacle itself.
Right. The world keeps
Your
turning.
world is going to do what the world is going to do. The traffic jam is there. The hypercritical boss is there. The sudden market downturn is there.
You can't magically make them disappear.
However, the power of perspective dictates how daunting that reality appears to us. It dictates how we approach it, how we view it, and how we contextualize it within our lives.
It's all in the framing.
What you actively decide the obstacle means directly determines how hard your body will try to overcome it. If your perceiving eye labels it a definitive death sentence, your body will naturally surrender.
But if you change the label,
If your observing eye labels it a mechanical puzzle, your brain will start working to solve it.
I want to leave you with this final, vital thought to carry with you. Whatever hurdle is sitting right in front of you today, whatever specific obstacle is currently causing your heart rate to spike and your vision to narrow, I want you to tackle it by acting as your own best friend.
Treat yourself well.
Step completely outside of yourself. Utilize that observing eye and systematically strip the obstacle of all its intimidating aura. Cut it down to its actual factual size.
Make it manageable.
And seriously consider this. How many of your past failures, the specific moments you still vividly replay in your head and beat yourself up over, were not actually a lack of skill or ability on your part, but simply a momentary lapse in objectivity?
Just a trick of the mind.
A brief moment of incorrect framing that sent your biological systems sprinting in entirely the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Think about that.
It changes everything.
It really does. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. If you found this valuable, please make sure to like and subscribe to get notified about the next episode in this series. We have so much more incredible insight to uncover together. Until next time, stay objective.